Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions for Match Week 5. My name is Chris Cowlin. I'll be hosting this evening alongside my good friend and channel regular Gareth McGuiness. We will be predicting the scores for Match Week 5. 7 games will take place in the Premier League on Saturday and 3 on Sunday. Now, Liverpool are leading the way in the Premier League at the moment. 12 points out of a possible 12. 4 wins out of 4. Arsenal, Tottenham and Bournemouth are second, third and fourth respectively. 3 wins out of 4, all losing 1. They all have 9 points. Now, there are 3 unbeaten teams in the Premier League so far this season. Liverpool, that I just mentioned. Chelsea, they've won 2 and drawn 2. And Crystal Palace is the other unbeaten side so far, winning 1 and drawing 3. Wolves are currently bottom of the table. They are the only team not to have picked up a point yet. They have lost all 4. And the other team yet to win in the Premier League is Aston Villa, who are currently in 19th spot. They have drawn 2 and they have lost 2. Gareth, good evening. How are you?
All good, Chris. I enjoyed your intro there. I mean, if anyone hasn't watched any football, you've brought them right up to speed. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that me and you do know a thing or two. So we're predicting these scorelines. And look, I don't know the results so far, but I've kind of been like having more of an invested interest in the scores in our games because we've been doing these predictions, and I do think we've been doing quite okay.
Yeah, we've got to check them back. So next week, I promise to bring everyone up to speed on who's winning, Gareth or I. In fact, please do get involved. Everyone watching and listening, please do get involved. Give us your score predictions, and I will talk about your predictions as much as we possibly can during each show. Gareth, what do you make of Match Week 4? Because as I mentioned there, Liverpool, of course, they were in action in the Champions League midweek. They got over the line again. They haven't dropped a point so far in the Premier League. The only team to have won every single game. As I mentioned there, Arsenal, Tottenham, Bournemouth, won 3 out of 4. They've all had good starts. What do you make of Match Week 4?
It's funny you mentioned Liverpool there. If the referee blew the whistle at 90 minutes on the button, Liverpool might be down beside Wolves. Because as you well know, they have been scoring a lot of late goals, and again last night in the Champions League, the 94th minute for Van Dijk. And look, there's a lot of people having opinions on certain teams, and Liverpool, of course, done a lot of business in the summer, Chris. And I think people were expecting Liverpool to be quite convincing winners of every game, and every game they've been involved in has been extremely tight. Is it the sign of a good team that wins when they're not at their best, or are they riding their luck? I think it is a bit of both. But I was watching more of the Bayern Munich and Chelsea game last night, but I did tune in for the final. Once I heard it was 2 each, and the Bayern Munich game was kind of over. They beat Chelsea 3-1. I wanted to see how the game would finish, and you just kind of felt, Chris, that Liverpool were going to score late again. So, although Liverpool are riding their luck, I think teams now playing Liverpool are going to be even more nervous going into those final moments because Liverpool have this record of score so late. And look, maybe it's a moment in time because, Chris, we've seen it last year with Brentford. I think they scored in the first minute 5 weeks in a row under Thomas Frank.
Incredible, yeah.
Sometimes records, you can get little runs like this. I do think Liverpool will have to improve, or you'll start seeing drop points. But look, it's been a very tight league. I think Jamie Carragher was right to say, Chris, or really than the Arsenal and Leeds game in Match Week 2 where Arsenal won 5-0. Most of the other games have been tight. Now, yes, teams have maybe pulled away, like, for example, Spurs, 3-0 winners last week. And there has been a few 3-0 games, but some of those games have actually been 0-0 at half-time. So I think the majority of games, Chris, have been very competitive, which makes it a very, very intriguing league because I haven't seen anyone yet, Chris, that you're going, oh my God, they look like the winners right away. I think everyone's building up, and there's more to come from other teams. And look, I think for all 20 teams this week, I think the promoted teams have done really well, and they're not just an easy 3 points for teams. And as well, if you're any team in the league this weekend, I don't think you're going to any ground fearing an absolute hammering because I think the standard has been quite fair amongst the teams. So it's very intriguing, Chris, and I think the league table shows up at the moment. There's a lot of points. There's only a few points between so many teams.
Gareth, from what you've just said there, and I know we're only a month into this brand new season and we're only 4 games in, Have you changed your mind on who you think will win the Premier League, who will finish in the top 5, and who will be relegated?
No, I still have Liverpool down as my League Winners. I have moved Arsenal up to second from Man City, so I've changed that. And I did have Spurs and it's fifth, but I've now promoted them to fourth. So I have made 2 changes already.
Okay, right. We've spoken a little bit about Liverpool already. We're going to talk about them again because the first game up of match week 5 is the Merseyside derby. Liverpool take on Everton at Anfield, 12:30 p.m. kickoff. As I mentioned earlier, the league position at the moment, Liverpool are top. Everton have not had a bad start at all. They are in 6th. Of course, David Moyes is continuing to do a great job at Everton, and Jack Grealish has had a very promising start in an Everton shirt. As I mentioned, Liverpool have won 4 out of 4, beating Bournemouth, Newcastle, Arsenal and Burnley. And Everton so far have beaten Brighton. They lost to Leeds on the opening weekend. They then beat Brighton. They then beat Wolves, and recently a 0-0 draw at home against Aston Villa. Gareth, let me start by asking you, a lot of people, including you and I, expected a big win for Liverpool at Burnley last weekend. It wasn't the case, but they did get over the line in the dying seconds or in stoppage time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really strange game because Liverpool had a lot of possession. I think they had over 80% possession, which we do see possession sometimes in the high 60s, maybe even touch 70. It's rare you see a team. I think they may have had about 82% possession, which is extremely rare in a Premier League game. But I have to say, Burnley were very, very well organised. Scott Parker has obviously learned his trade. And if you remember, Chris, his last game against Liverpool in the Premier League was a 9-0 drubbing by Bournemouth, and he obviously got sacked just after it. And I think that was 3 games under the season in 2022-23 season. So he's went away. He's obviously been at Club Brugge. He's been at Burnley. And I think, you were thinking up until the end they were going to hang on there, Burnley. But I think they're unbeaten at home, Chris, under Scott Parker up until that game. So they're basically a penalty paid away from continuing that record, and they're a very difficult team to play against, especially at more. They seem to be really well structured, and I think it was a credit to Scott Parker, but because although Liverpool had a lot of possession, Burnley looked quite dangerous in the counter attack. And if I try to think about this in a way of if he never watched football before, and somebody sat down and says one of these is the title favourites and one of these is the favourites to get relegated, other than all those possession stats, there doesn't look to be a lot of difference in quality between the 2 teams. But that was down to how Burnley, shut down Liverpool, made it extremely difficult to play through the lines. Kind of, in a way, Liverpool's best way of trying to get the ball in the box was a long ball, and Burnley were quite comfortable dealing with balls into the box. So I think Scott Parker deserves a lot of credit. But having said that, Liverpool will be disappointed that they didn't create enough in the game because, you're going to play against deep blocks most weeks if you're Liverpool Football Club, and if teams are looking at how Burnley have set up, they will try and do something similar and try to stop Liverpool, because we've seen already, Chris, this season, maybe not in the Burnley game, but we've seen it last night with Atletico Madrid, the Bournemouth game, the Newcastle game. They are conceding a fair few goals, and Burnley did have a few chances, especially in the first half, to score goals against them. So, look, Scott has a lot of work to do to get this Liverpool team to where everyone expected to be. But the beauty in it all, Chris, is they've got 12 points out of 12. And, if the penny does drop and they do click into gear, is anyone going to be able to touch them? But until that comes, I'm sure the likes of Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea, even the likes of Spurs, looking up, will be thinking, well, they aren't scaring us at the moment. So, but a brilliant game to look forward to this weekend, the Merseyside derby. But look, Everton have impressed me too, so I'm looking forward to this game.
Yeah, Alexander Isak is, of course, in line to make his Premier League debut for Liverpool, having made his Champions League debut for the midweek against Atletico Madrid. Now, Liverpool are very used to winning, especially at Anfield in Premier League history in this fixture, though, Gareth. Last season, they won 1-0 against Everton at Anfield on the 2nd of April. Liverpool have lost just 1 of their last 28 home games against Everton in all competitions, winning 17 and drawing 10. What a record that is, winning each of their last 4 in a row since a 2-0 defeat in Feb 2021. Only from February 1933 to January 1937 have Liverpool ever won 5 straight home matches against Everton, and Everton have won just 2 of their last 29 Premier League Merseyside derbies against Liverpool, drawing 14 and losing 13, and have failed to score in 5 of their last 7. What's your score prediction?
It's an interesting one, Chris, because I've seen a stat today that, and this is a very strange one for Liverpool, that in their last 9 games, so this dates back in the last season, they've led 2-goal leads slip on 5 occasions. So, I mean, and they've won, I think, every one of them, bar one, they drew with Arsenal. So, you know, it's very unusual for a team to be 2-0 up, come back to 2-2 and go on and win so often. So there's obviously some sort of mentality issue there at Liverpool in terms of maybe they're letting up when they're 2-0 up, but they can quickly switch focus again and get in and push on and get a goal. So, I mean, Everton have got to be careful that this Liverpool team at the moment doesn't know when they're beat, doesn't accept draws. They always try and find a way to win. Everton, as it says, have impressed me, but they do have an awful record in Anfield, like so many people. You know, this is a big game for Everton, bigger than some of the other teams that go there because it is a derby. It's a tough one. David Moyes will have them well organised, but I just feel that Liverpool are riding the crest of a wave at the moment, and perhaps a little bit of lady luck on their side. So I'm just going to say they're going to get the job done. 2 goals, they won.
I've written down exactly the same one, 2-1. I think it's going to be a late win for Liverpool yet again. Yeah. Right, Gareth, next up is the 3:00 kickoffs, and we're going to go with our side, Tottenham Hotspur. So, of course, we are travelling to the Amex to face Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton at the moment are in 13th, Spurs are 3rd. Now, Brighton so far in the Premier League have drawn 1-1 against Fulham. They then lost 2-0 away at Everton. They then won against Oxford in the League Cup 6-0. That was a good win for them. They then beat Manchester City at home at the Amex. And most recently, they lost away at Bournemouth 2-1. And of course, we know Tottenham's season very well. Of course, beat Burnley 3-0, beat City away 2-0, lost 1-0 at home to Bournemouth. And of course, last time out, beat West Ham very comfortably at the London Stadium 3-0. What do you expect from Spurs? I'm going to put the lineup on the screen now, if I can find it. The team that we actually put out against Villarreal midweek. Now, how many of these players? Of course, we know games are coming thick and fast for us. We know that Thomas Frank has to rotate. How would you expect him to set up against Brighton on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I don't think we played that well against Villarreal. We got the early goal, the goalkeeping error, but we never really pushed on. And I think Villarreal were pretty average as well. There was the odd chance, mostly from some of the mistakes that we made in possession that Thomas Frank spoke about, but they didn't scream to me like a team that's going to be doing anything serious in this competition. They may get round to the playoffs, but I'd be shocked if that Villarreal team were in the last 16. So that is a bit of a concern, although it's early days in Thomas Frank's reign. I don't know, Chris. I thought Jed Spence struggled in possession on Tuesday night. Now, I'm a big fan of Jed Spence. I think defensively, very good in the duels. But I just wonder when in those games when you're having so much possession at home, if Jed Spence hinders you because he's right-footed playing on the left, he has to come inside a lot. He can't really go on the outside. He's not really comfortable crossing with his left foot. Is there a case they bring Udogie in, or they leave it until Wednesday and bring Udogie in? But that'll be the interesting one. I don't see Porro, Romero, Van de Ven changing. Of course, Vicario will play. I think Paulinho will come back into the midfield. It'll be interesting to see he drops out because we know he's a big fan of Sarr, scored last week. Luke Fergus just picked up 2 man of the match awards in a row. I don't think he can drop him. So, and I thought Bentancur was actually one of the better players on Tuesday night. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in midfield, but I would expect Paulinho to come in because I think when he came in on Tuesday night, Chris, he did seem to calm things down. and we got more of a grip and control in the game towards the end. So it's interesting. I think Bentancur may well miss out, and he may go with Bellini, Bentancur, and Sarr. I don't think the front three will change. I think he'll go with Kudos, Richarlison, and Simmons, because I don't think he's not as ready to start for 90 minutes yet. But I just don't know, Chris. There's a few things that I'm slightly worried about at the moment. Yes, the results are good. Yes, we're keeping clean sheets. But I'm just concerned that Xavi Simmons already looks uncomfortable out on that left side. The problems that we're having with Jed Spence, I think, in possession because he's right-footed. And then the actual build-up play. I know Thomas Frank said that he really wanted to fix the defence first, so you have to give him time. But I just think we're relying a lot on set pieces at the moment and kind of long balls forward. And I think the more the weeks go on, teams are going to find out how we're going to set up, and we're going to have different ways they build up and create chances. Because even against West Ham, Chris, where we won 3-0, we didn't create an awful lot from open play, and it was the same against Villarreal. I had those issues against Bournemouth as well when we were speaking before the West Ham game. That just in general build-up play at the moment, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. But look, the positive thing, just like Liverpool, is we're picking up good results. And to be honest, results is the most important thing in football.
Yeah, it's been a good start for Spurs in the Premier League, and let's hope that it does continue. But as I said, games are coming thick and fast, and I know some people were confused last weekend when we played West Ham that Matisse Tell was in the starting 11, but Thomas Frank has to use all of his squad. Now, last season, of course, Brighton did the double over Spurs in the Premier League. They put 7 goals past us, actually. They beat us 3-2 at the Amex in October, and then the last game of the season, of course, we were Europa League winners then, so... Now, it was our 22nd Premier League defeat of the season, losing 4-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Tottenham have lost away to Brighton in both of their last 2 league seasons, but have never before lost 3 successive visits. Gareth, what are you going for on this one?
It's an interesting one because I think our games against Brighton at the Amex have been kind of high scoring. I think we lost 3-2 last year and 4-2 the year before. And there's been a lot of chances and a lot of goals in the games. And look, thinking back to last year, we threw the game away, didn't we? We should have been out of sight really in the first half and capitulated a bit in the second half. I don't see this being as open as previous games between these two clubs. I know Brighton put 6 past Oxford, but in the league they haven't been scoring a lot of goals. They were second best against Bournemouth last week. They were lucky to still be in the game against Man City, but produced a really good second half performance. They won the game 2-1. Everton away, they created a lot of chances where putting the ball in the net. The Fulham game, they conceded in the last minute, but they're not scoring a bag full of goals. And I just think it could be a tight game. If we can keep an hour clean sheet, Chris, I expect us to win this game. So I'm going to say we're going to keep an hour clean sheet, and we're going to win the game
1-0.
Yeah.
1-0. Okay. I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs. Ray here, Spurs fan, reluctantly thinking 3-2 Brighton.
I don't see it being a high score. I really don't. I don't think Thomas Frank's going to get involved in these kind of games this early on. I think until he trusts that the defence is where he's happy with it, then you'll see him aggressive Spurs. But the main thing at the moment, Chris, is if you're keeping clean sheets, you've every chance of winning a game. You know, it's that simple. If you're not having to score 2, 3, 4 goals every week, then if you can win games with 1 and 2 goals, then you know confidence builds in the team, and then you might see a more progressive Spurs. But at the moment, Chris, I think it's going well. We couldn't have really asked for a better start, or than the final 5 minutes of the game against PSG. And look, the Bournemouth game was disappointing, but Bournemouth's start of the season has been very impressive, and Bournemouth are catching a lot of teams cold at the moment.
Right. Next up, Burnley take on Nottingham Forest. Of course, Ange Postecoglou is back in the Premier League. He started at the Emirates last week, losing 3-0. He said that on Wednesday, his philosophy, his style will be back. And then they were 2-0 up at Swansea in the League Cup. They lost the game 3-2, so he's conceded 6 goals in his first 2 games. They go to Turf Moor, Forest, on Saturday, 3 p.m. Burnley are currently in 17th. Forest are in 15th. Now, both teams have only scored 4 goals so far in the Premier League this season. Forest have now lost their last 2 in the Premier League, losing 3-0 at home against West Ham, and as I mentioned, losing away at Arsenal last week. Burnley have lost their last 2 as well, 3-2 away at Manchester United, and the game that we've already spoken about, the 1-0 home defeat against Liverpool. How do you see this one going, Gareth? Because surely, let's get your thoughts about Ange being back and the 2 games that he has managed so far. I know the Arsenal one, it was probably a little bit unfair in some ways, wasn't it, to put him in? He'd only had 1 training session with that Nottingham Forest side. It might have been best to put someone else in charge. So his record, didn't start off as a 3-0 defeat. But what do you make of this game on Saturday?
I was going to say, it's ironic, Chris. We were speaking about being 2-0 up away at Brighton. And coming back and get Brighton coming back and getting 3-2. And then what happens with Ange last night? 2-0 up and losing the game 3-2. And somebody actually says that his first Europa League game for Nottingham Forest is Real Betis. And his first game for Celtic in the Europa League was Real Betis. They were 2-0 up in that game and lost it. So Ange's teams do seem to have a habit of going 2-0 up in games and not being able to see them out. If I remember, there was a game last year, Chris, I was at too, at the Spurs Stadium, 2-0 up against Chelsea and lost the game 4-3. So that, for whatever reason, these teams tend to lose leads and capitulate a bit. Now, I didn't see the game, but I did watch the highlights back. And I mean, the second Nottingham Forest goal is Ange Postecoglou's team in a nutshell. Wonderful, quick, concise, attacking football. And they walked the ball on it. And yes, it's against a championship team, but he made a lot of changes as well. He wasn't the strongest team he put out. So, already you're starting to see Ange Postecoglou put his footprints on this Swansea team. The worrying thing would be is what happens in the second half is something that Spurs fans seen a lot last year. I think that's why he divided so much opinion, because on one hand, you've seen this really attacking, great, entertaining football. But on the other hand, you've seen this kamikaze, weak, spineless teams at times, conceding a lot of goals and making a lot of mistakes. And there has to be a trade-off at some point. Personally, I'm going to be honest. I'm a big fan of Ange, and I think he's a breath of fresh air. He's what the Premier League needs. Do you think his time at Spurs was up? I do think it was probably the right time to move him on. But, I would love to see him do well at Forest. But I would be concerned at this record that's going around where his teams score all these goals no matter where he is, but he concedes so many goals. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying Forest were a watertight defence, but 6 goals and conceded in 2 games is very unlike Forest. And I don't know if anyone's got a stat there, but I don't remember them ever being 2-0 up under Nuno and losing the game 3-2. So these are the things that Forest fans are going to be way up in their heads. And look, there's no doubt, Chris, there is a certain element of the media, certain fans out there that want to see Ange Postecoglou suffer because they think it's a big joke and let's laugh at him. And he's a very proud man. And no matter what anyone says, they have the bottle to come out and say what he said last year in September, that he doesn't usually win things, he always does, and he would win here, is a massive statement. And no matter how tough it got, he always believed and he always stuck by his beliefs. And as tough as it got at times for him last year, he never really criticised the players too often. He kind of took responsibility himself. Yes, there was injuries, and he touched on that. But he did say that a lot of it was on him. And I think Forest are going to get a really honest manager. But look, this is a massive game already because, like you pointed out, maybe going into the Arsenal game was a silly thing to do from a club point of view and from an Ange Postecoglou point of view. Like you said, only 1 training session. But also it's Arsenal away. Not many teams are going to go there and win anyway. So, anything for Forest there would have been a bonus. But for the game to get away from them like it did on last night is a big concern, and it puts pressure on this game against Burnley, because if they were to get beat, already it's starting to look like it was a bad decision to part ways with Nuno, and Ange becomes even under more and more pressure. But I think if he can get a 1 here, Wednesday becomes distant memory, and they start looking forward. But it's imperative he gets a result here by hook or by crook.
I've got to admit, Gareth, I don't really get the banter from a lot of Spurs fans about Ange losing. I get it with the Marinakis situation completely, and there are a number of tweets going around on Wednesday evening of Marinakis saying, we always win. It was quite funny banter, but I don't quite get the banter with Ange. He delivered this a European trophy, and I don't know why some people are wishing bad results on someone like Ange, but there we are. That's the modern day, I suppose.
The only time I'll not be supporting Ange this year in a game is when they're playing Forest and playing Spurs. Because it's just this would be even if he doesn't succeed at Spurs, I think there's just something about him that's really likable, and I think it's a bit like Jose Mourinho. Now, I'm not a fan of his football and his style of play, but his character is really, really good. And it's a bit disappointing, I suppose, that he's going to be going to Benfica. I thought maybe there was a possibility he could go on at West Ham. Not be saying I'd be liking West Ham to do well, but when Mourinho's press conferences are on, or he's doing his interview before a game or after a game, you're glued to a TV. It's the same way Ange Postecoglou. There's not enough characters in football. Sometimes you see managers and they don't want to be in front of a camera, whereas the likes of Jose and Ange, it's just like a fun experience. So, no, for me, I hope Ange does really well. It's unfortunate what happened with Gibbs White and Martin. The Spurs fans took a real dislike to Marinakis, but we've got to move on. We've got to move past that. At the end of the day, Ange delivered Spurs something that they were without for 17 years. And, without in Europe since 1984, Chris, we were there. They gave us memories that we'll never, ever forget. So I feel like we're on Ange's debt. And, if that debt means for some fans that they don't like him and they don't, it's a big joke. And look, one thing I would say to Forest fans is,
wait until the second season.
But do you know even if you do lose a game, at least you're watching. At least you're going to get a fun game. Whereas I think at times at our clubs where if you don't win, it seems an absolute travesty because you haven't seen a goal, you haven't seen any good football. There was times last year where you were losing patience with Ange, but most of the games I was at, Spurs scored 2 or 3 goals at them, so at least you were getting some sort of experience. So I think Forest fans will warm you as soon as the results come, and hopefully it starts this weekend for them.
Yeah, Ange said in that first Forest press conference that Nuno, certainly last season, has now set the bar very, very high, and there is big expectations at that football club. And I know that we've spoken about the Swansea game losing 3-2 last weekend, losing 3-0 away at Arsenal, but of course Nuno's last game they lost 3-0 at home against West Ham. Now Burnley have lost 6 of their last 7 Premier League games, winning only 1. While only 2 of their last 7 wins in the competition have come against sides that aren't newly promoted. Fulham back in December 2023, beating them 2-0, and Brentford back in March 2024, beating them 2-1. Personally, for me, Gareth, I think that this game's got a draw written all over it. I'm going to go 1-1. Why is that funny?
I think the onus is going to be. I think the onus is going to be on Forest. I think Burnley have shown in the games that they've played that they're going to be very resilient, and they're not worried about having the ball, and they're going to be waiting for transitions, set pieces. The Forest are going to have to be careful with that, but I think Big Ange is going to open up here because he knows he needs to get a 1. And I'm going to say that the Big Ange Postecoglou ring gets kicked off this Saturday. Forest, they won by 3 goals, they won.
Wow, okay. So Liverpool can only score 1 and it's a penalty. And Forest going to go there and get 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Next up, West Ham host Crystal Palace. As I mentioned, Crystal Palace are unbeaten in the Premier League this season. West Ham, of course, lost 3-0 at home to Tottenham last weekend. Wasn't a great atmosphere in the last 20 minutes. The stadium was pretty much empty. West Ham are down in 18th. They've only got 3 points. Crystal Palace are in 9th. They've got 6 points. Both teams so far this season have scored 4. Gareth, West Ham United, I know we've spoken a bit about them in previous weeks. They seem to be in trouble at the moment. It was a very comfortable win for Spurs. It wasn't the usual celebrations from the Tottenham Hotspur fan base last weekend because I think it was so easy. And that's not me being arrogant. That is a fact. A lot of people, I know a few West Ham fans, sadly, and a lot of them said that, no wonder why they left at 60, 70 minutes outside the stadium because some of them felt embarrassed by that performance. Crystal Palace, however, we've spoken about Oliver Glasner and, our admiration for him and the job that he is doing at Crystal Palace. They are unbeaten. They're a very difficult side to beat. I know we're getting to score predictions in a minute, but, do you think that West Ham can get anything out of this game this weekend?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is start reducing the prices of their tickets because fans are only getting 60 or 70 minutes of a proper game.
Well,
because Chelsea
actually, Gareth, on their board, the game that's coming up against Brentford, they actually put kids for £1. So they do want to sell. They do want to sell some tickets.
Well, I just funny because I remember the Chelsea game. So they played 2 games at home, and the Chelsea game, the game was over with about 20 or 30 minutes to go. I think they were 5-1 down. They were blitzed, and it was similar in this game. Spurs got 3 goals in the blink of an eye, really, in the second half. And let's be honest, West Ham were very fortunate in the first half. They, for that disallowed goal. I think everybody that's seen it, all the pundits, even the ex-referees, have said that the goal should have stood. So, it could have been over at half time if that goal had counted. Because we could have really got into gear. But I think that'll be the worrying thing, Chris, for West Ham, is you mentioned there about we weren't really celebrating that much because it was so easy. And I don't really think Spurs got out of first gear. I don't think it was a wonderful Spurs performance. They were decent. The worrying thing at Aston in 2 games and the home games against Chelsea and Spurs is every time a corner comes into the box, West Ham look all at sea. They look so disorganised. The goalkeeper doesn't seem to like off his line, and teams are just putting the ball on that 6-yard line, and they seem to be losing a lot of battles and duels. And you seen this against Sunderland on the opening day as well, where as soon as they seem to concede 1 goal, they completely capitulate. I think Sunderland put 3 goals past them in the second half. Spurs put 3 goals past them. Chelsea put 5 goals past them in the space of 30 or 40 minutes between the 2 halves. And they were 1-0 up in that game. So I think that's the real concern. That there doesn't seem to be much of a... They seem very brittle. And Graham Potter, his stock was once high at one stage of his career. He doesn't look to have any answers to these problems that West Ham are having. And he looks totally lost on the touchline. And I think it's worrying that we're seeing the reports coming out that if there wasn't a positive result on Saturday, there may be a change. And we're hearing Slaven Bilic could be returning to West Ham. I think when you hear these things of certain names being so strongly linked, and we've seen this with Nuno and Ange, it's probably been preliminary talks. There's probably a deal in place should they pull the plug. So you might see straight after the game or within 24 hours, the manager's out, and within 24 hours, there's a new manager in. Teams are always putting in contingency plans now. And I think due to everyone can lose games. I think it's the manner that West Ham are losing the games, Chris, is what's really worrying the board and what's really antagonising the fans. Is everybody can lose games 1-0, 2-1, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of fight in that West Ham team at the moment, and there seems to be a lot of protesting going on against the owners, and it just seems like West Ham are going through this phase where they maybe have 1 or 2 good seasons, and then they go back to this, and there's a manager sacked, there's more pressure on the board. And look, West Ham be on the TV more than enough, and over the last year, Chris, it's actually sad to see from a football point of view how many times the stadium's been empty with 20 or 30 minutes left in the game because they did so convincingly. And at the moment, Chris, they are one of the favourites. I think they've been on this forum that we're watching. Wolves, who are really struggling, seem to be a lot more competitive. They're losing games by West Ham and Brentford. I think that's a real worrying sign, and they don't look like they've got a lot of goals in the team either, because Gerard Bowen has confidence, looks shot to pieces because of the team he's been with. I'm not sure if he really wants to be there, and they don't really have many more options up front. So I think at the minute it's a real damning place that West Ham find themselves in. And Jose was desperate to get back to the Premier League. I know he's going to Benfica. I'm sure West Ham reached out, and maybe Jose didn't fancy West Ham, and who would it? Because there's no transfer window until January. And with that squad they have, we said already, Chris, there's a real imbalance there. There's legs in midfield, and Spurs all over them in that second half with the likes of Bergvall and Sarr. And I think you're seeing more and more teams United being 1 and West Ham being 2, they're very, very easy teams to play against.
Yeah. Another manager that is being linked with the West Ham job. I know you mentioned Slaven Bilic there, but Nuno is being linked to the job as well via TalkSport. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if I saw that West Ham lost at the London Stadium yet again this weekend against Crystal Palace, and Graham Potter then went out the door, and either someone like Nuno came in. Wouldn't surprise me at all. We speak about Oliver Glasner with great respect, you and I, Gareth, and we've done so for the last couple of months, certainly. Crystal Palace have lost just 2 of their last 17 away Premier League matches, which is an incredible record. Winning 8, drawing 7. Keeping 9 clean sheets in their previous 15 on the road. An incredible stat. Their previous 9 away clean sheets beforehand came over a spell of 51 games. This is what an impact that Oliver Glasner has had on Crystal Palace.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing 2 teams from 2 completely opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got Crystal Palace, who are incredibly difficult to beat, really well organised, can win games different ways. Well, that's being on the front foot at home against a team maybe they're expected to beat, or away from home. We've seen them go to Stamford Bridge and limit Chelsea on the opening weekend of the season to absolutely nothing. They had a goal disallowed from a free kick that people thought was harsh. So, I mean, Palace are capable of going anywhere. They will be Villa and won 3-0. They will not be fazed by going anywhere this season. And as it says there, if you were a manager or a fan right now, let's just say you're a fan, if you could pick a team to play this weekend, it probably would be West Ham or Man United, because I think, the two, there's so much turmoil and so much negativity around the two. You look at Burnley last week. Burnley gave Liverpool a real game because they were organised, they were hungry, they were determined to make it difficult. Whereas I think if Palace were to score early here against West Ham, I think the game will be virtually over, because I just don't see West Ham coming back, and more likely they would fold and Palace would run out convincing winner. So I think for West Ham, they stand any chance, Chris, they're going to have to score first. But I just think Oliver Glasner's teams at the minute are just too cute, too well organised, and they'll sense vulnerability in West Ham. I don't really see anything other than a Crystal Palace victory.
I'm going to go 2-0 Palace. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, I've done the same, Chris. 2-0 Palace.
It worries me, Gareth, when we agree. Right, next up, Wolves. They need a point. They certainly need a point. They are hosting Leeds at Molineux. Wolves are in 20th. Leeds United are in 16th. Wolves, as I mentioned at the start, haven't got a point yet. Leeds have got 4 points. Now, goals scored this season in the Premier League. Wolves have scored 2. Leeds have only scored 1. Will this be a high-scoring game, Gareth? Will we see goals? Because between the two of them, in 8 Premier League games combined, we've only seen 3 goals.
Yeah, no, definitely not, Chris. I think this will be one goal, probably won it. I mean, I'll speak about Leeds before we come on to Wolves, Chris, because Leeds were so close last week to getting a point at Fulham. Bizarre own goal cost them in the end, but even if they had held on there for a draw, I think we're already seeing with Leeds a different type of Daniel Farke team. Farke, a bit like Scott Parker, has been in the Premier League before and been relegated. And I think we see it with Vincent Kompany. And maybe Vincent Kompany was different because he was a big name. He got the Bayern Munich job based on his style of play. But, Farke and Parker aren't as glamorous as Kompany in terms of his career as a player. So maybe that's why, and Kompany being a Pep, under Pep, maybe he got that opportunity. But I think we're seeing real signs of maturity in these managers where they're not going to come up, Chris, and make the same mistakes they did in the past. Farke won the league by Norwich before, and he says, we're going to play our way. We're going to do the exact same thing we did in the Championship. And, they're getting battered every week because they haven't got the quality. Scott Parker tried the same with Bournemouth and Fulham, trying to be expansive, trying to be on the front foot and relegated. And of course, the last time against Bournemouth, he was sacked after that 9-0 defeat, like we mentioned earlier, after the 3rd game of the season. Already we're seeing a different side to these managers, and they're using their experience of their previous experience in the Premier League as reasons to stick let's make ourselves hard to beat, and let's try and pick up points, because they've looked at the likes of Southampton and Leicester and Ipswich who have come up, and you think back to the season before that, the likes of Sheffield United, Luton, who really struggle, Chris, to even get the 25 points, and virtually give themselves absolutely no hope of staying up. We're already seeing with Sunderland and Burnley and Leeds this season, they're going to make it more competitive, and they're going to make it more difficult to beat. The concern I would have for Leeds at the moment, Chris, is they're one goal scored and it was a penalty. They haven't scored from open play and they don't really look like scoring. So whilst, yes, it's important to be difficult to beat, I'm not sure they've got the attacking players that they hurt teams in this league, and that'll be the main concern. And I think Wolves, whilst they're very happy with the manager, I mean, we're hearing that he's going to get a new contract, and that's after losing 4 straight games.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah,
that's usually the loyalty they have behind them, and probably the recognition of how difficult it is, because again, they've sold more of their best players. But I still think they've got enough there, Wolves. They score goals and hurt teams. I'm not sure about Leeds. So I think this is the perfect opportunity for Wolves this weekend, Chris. They not only get a point on the board, but get 3 and get off the get their season going in the right direction.
I think we're going to agree again. I'll give you this stat and then I'll give you my score prediction. Wolves are winless in their last 4 Premier League meetings with Leeds United, drawing 1 and losing 3, despite scoring first in 3 of those games. Gareth, I agree with what you just said, and I think that this has to be the turning point. And of course, Pereira being offered a new contract, or there's certainly talks about a new contract right now. And you don't often hear that when a Premier League manager loses 4 on the bounce, sitting bottom of the Premier League. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Wolves win. They need to turn this around very quickly, and I feel like this is going to be the game. I don't think it's going to be a classic. I think it's just going to be a 1-0 win, which Wolves would be absolutely delighted about. What are you going to go for?
I'll call on that as well, Chris, the Wolves.
Wow. Our score predictions used to be so different. Right, next up, Manchester United take on Chelsea. Of course, we've spoken about Ruben Amorim so many times, Gareth, on this show. Now, they're sitting in 14th at the moment. I expect that Manchester United fans would have hoped and expected for a lot more, even though we're only 4 games in. They've got 4 points at the moment. Chelsea are currently 5th. They have 8 points. Manchester United have scored 4 so far out of 4 games. Chelsea have scored 9. Now, last time out, last weekend, Manchester United lost 3-0 away at Manchester City, whilst Brentford last weekend drew 2-2. Chelsea drew 2-2 at Brentford last weekend. What are you thinking on this? Can Ruben Amorim, I suppose the main question I should ask, can Ruben Amorim turn this around at Old Trafford and make Manchester United a successful team again? Or will Manchester United end up sacking Amorim in the very near future and they go round circles again, having just spent so much money?
I think his time to make United successful under him is running out. I think there's 3 games before the international break. Of course, United aren't done European competitions. So he's got, I think it's Chelsea at home. I think they got Brentford away, and I'm not sure who Sunderland at home. I think he's got these. There is 3 games before the international break, and I think these 3 games will be it. I don't see it continuing on after that, Chris, if the results haven't improved. Now, look, on his defence, he's had a very difficult start to the season. I mean, they've had Arsenal at home, who are a better team than them. They've had Man City away, who are a better team than them. And Chelsea at home this weekend, who are probably a better team than them. So I think, in terms of how the came out, he's been maybe dealt a short straw. But it dates back to last season, Chris, as well. The way they lost the Europa League final, the Spurs team missing the 3 creative players, the league form was horrendous. And I think it's 8 wins from 31 games, which is absolutely shocking for Man United. I think 4 or 5 of them ones are against teams that have been are now relegated and they're not in the Championship. So in terms of winning games against proper Premier League opposition, they've been scarce. Now, I watched Chelsea last night, Chris, against Bayern Munich, and I think Chelsea are still a work in progress as well. And we've mentioned this, Chris. People were mentioning them as potential title contenders. We kind of shot them down, and you can see that last night in the performance against Bayern Munich. They're still a very young and naive team, and they gift Harry Kane the chances they gifted Harry Kane. You're never going to get a result. Kane was absolutely wonderful last night, but they gave up too many chances against the Bayern Munich team, who were too good. They refused them. They made a lot of mistakes playing out of the back, and I think this is a game where I think United fans are very understanding. They're not like most clubs where they boo at half-time and boo at full-time. They tend to give managers as much time as possible. And I think there will be United fans thinking, oh, Chelsea are in a better place than us. But I do think there is an opportunity for Man United to get a result, because I think Amram will be pretty content to maybe sit back and let Chelsea have the ball. I think they could be dangerous in transitions, dangerous in maybe winning the ball high up the pitch with the likes of Mbumo. Not sure if Enquiries back. Or Mason Mount's back, but the likes of Diallo and Mbumo, they can definitely cause Chelsea's defence problems. But look, it's a big game. It's a home game. It's on the TV at 5. It's going to be near enough dark at the time of the lights. And if they were to lose this, Chris, I think it would just the pressure would really mount. And I think if he didn't get positive results against Brentford and Sunderland, they may well make a change during the international break, because he may point out that Chelsea, United, and Arsenal are better teams, but if he can't beat Brentford and he can't beat the Sunderlands, they fell over the line against Burnley at home. They'll be looking and going, where are these points going to come from? And they spent a lot of money in the summer. They bring players, and it's not, as you pointed out, it's not been the start of the season they envisaged. And there's still massive problems in the system that he's trying to play, and he keeps mentioning this after every game. It's a bit like the Ange situation last year, Chris, where the media is on a witch hunt because of the style of play and the system that he's setting up, and he's basically giving them the same answers every week, a bit like Ange was doing last year. I am not going to change. If they want to change, they're going to have to change the manager. I am going to stick with my 3-4-3 principle.
That's the point, Gareth. And I've spoken to a few Man United fans recently, and they've turned around and said that he is just not adaptable. They're not seeing any change. It's the same old stuff, and they're getting a little bit bored of it. And the fact that he has gone out and spent all that money, and you and I have spoken about Manchester United recruitment over the last couple of years. It hasn't been good enough, and some of the sales, they've lost huge amounts of money, but they've spent a lot of money again. They've backed the manager in the summer, and that's why Manchester United fans are expecting a lot more. But let me tell you this. Chelsea v Manchester United is the most drawn fixture in Premier League history, finishing level 27 times. 14 of those draws have come at Old Trafford, and Manchester United are unbeaten in their last 12 Premier League home games against Chelsea, winning 5 and drawing 7 since a 1-0 defeat back in May 2013. I think that's going to change, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 Chelsea win, and I think that Amorim is going to be in even bigger trouble than what he is now. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a stab, because I just think at the moment, Chris, Chelsea are... You seen it with Brentford last week and Bayern Munich. They're giving teams too many opportunities. They are very good at times in the attacking third. And, midfield's good with Caicedo and Fernandes. I just think at the back, and this is one of the reasons why we says, Chris, we don't really see him as title contenders, as the goalkeeper has a mistake on him, and the defence, I'm not really convinced by it. So I think they will give United chances, and I think Mbumo was very unlucky not to get at least one goal last week. Fantastic save from Donnarumma. I don't see Sanchez being able to make saves like that if Mbumo's is conical. So I'm going to go for a high score and 2-2 draw.
Okay, you're going to go for a draw. Right, okay. Right, so the last game of Saturday, and actually, let me, before I ask you about this game, Fulham v Brentford, what do you make of all these staggered kick-off times? So we've got Liverpool v Everton at 12:30. Then we've got 4 games at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Then we've got that game that we've just spoken about, Man United, Chelsea at 5:30. And then we've got all these 8 o'clock kick-offs now on a Saturday. What do you make of it? Do you like the fact that it is staggered throughout the whole day so you can watch all these matches?
I'm going to give you 2 points of view. I'm going to give you the match day going fan view, and I'm going to give you my view in terms of I don't get as many games because I'm in Ireland. So from a fan's point of view, like yourself, Chris, if Spurs are away to Newcastle on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I mean, that is dreadful for the fan that's going to that game.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting in the pub watching the football and there's a game at 5:30 and there's a game at 8, well, it's
you're loving it.
Isn't it? So it's designed for the TV. It's not designed for the match day going fan, and that's the issue.
I know that.
I don't want to go into this rant, but I'm looking at games for November, and the TV fixtures were supposed to be released yesterday. Then the Fans Association put out today they're going to be released today, and as of what time are we now? We are nearly 8 o'clock, I think. We're 7:45 this evening. Still no games released. So they'll probably come out tomorrow, but it's not the point. The fans aren't really looked at as being important. It's more about the TV numbers. And Chris, you probably don't see many games on TV because you're at the games. But, the people that are sitting in the pubs at the weekend, absolutely 8 o'clock kickoff. But if you're the Wolves fan that's going to be in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday week at 8 o'clock and the last train's I think it's 10:15. Well, you have to leave before the game's over. So, ridiculous. But he'll point out, well, if you want to go to these games, can you just maybe, hotels are available, but it's a lot of money, Chris. But that's the reason why there's so many staggered kickoffs, because of the TV.
Right, so the last game of Saturday, 8 p.m. kickoff, Fulham v Brentford at Craven Cottage. Now, Fulham are currently 11th, Brentford are 12th. Now, total points at the moment, Fulham have 5, Brentford have 4. Goals scored this season, Fulham have scored 3 and Brentford have scored 5. Now, last time out, Fulham beat Leeds 1-0 and Brentford drew 2-2 at home against Chelsea. Now, Fulham completed a Premier League double over Brentford last season and are looking to win 3 games in a row over the Bees for the second time after winning their first 3 clashes from 1928 to 1929. How do you see this one going, Gareth? Fulham v Brentford, and what have you made of these two sides so far this season?
I'll start with Brentford, Chris, because I have to hold my hands up. I thought Brentford would really struggle this year. Losing the likes of him, obviously Thomas Frank going, Norbert captain, and we always thought that Vista would move, and he did move on deadline day. But I think Keith Andrews has handled himself really well for a manager that's had no managerial experience in the Premier League. Of course, he was part of the coaching staff under Thomas Frank. He was on the set pieces, but I think he's just a really, really good speaker in the media. He doesn't really complain too much. He's never made excuses for the players that's left and the transition that's happened at Brentford this summer. And I thought he played really well against Chelsea last week. And you can see how much emphasis he's putting on the set pieces, because he knows they maybe haven't got as much quality as they've had in previous years, and he knows they're going to have to be good from defending set pieces and attacking set pieces, and even throw-ins they look dangerous. So I think we're seeing a real, wouldn't say a disciple of Thomas Frank, but someone you can see that he's been in and around that coaching staff and knows the fine margins that the Premier League games can be won and lost on. And I think Brentford are going to be that kind of marginal gain team every week, where they're just trying to maybe the most attractive team, but they will give everything and they'll try and win games, the tight ones. So I think big up to Keith Andrews, and as an Irishman, I hope he continues his decent start to the season. Fulham, as we pointed out, Chris, in recent weeks, had an awful day at Stamford Bridge with the decisions going against them. Didn't look like they were going to get the one last week, but Leeds obviously scored a late own goal. So I think that may well have been Fulham's first one of the season. I think they had a couple of draws and a defeat at Chelsea. So good for them to get off the board. I think they've done some business late in the transfer window. I heard reports that the Brazilian fella, Kevin, looks a real talent. So it'll be interesting to see Fulham over the next few weeks. When they're on the TV, I'll get a look at them and see what kind of way Marco Silva's got them set up this season. But I think somebody, which you mentioned about Oliver Glasner, and we've talked about Areola in the past, I think he's a really good Premier League manager, and he seems to be able to deal with setbacks, whether that's refereeing decisions for losing players, and Fulham continue on as being a steady area in the Premier League. I don't really see them as, I don't think they're as at the level of a Bournemouth or a Brighton we're expecting to push into Europe. I just think they'll probably be another season of stability and pushing for maybe a top 10 finish. But this game, I remember last year, I think Fulham scored 2 late goals, and every time it was a Monday night football game. There wasn't really much happening in the game. Brentford scored early, and Fulham scored. I think Harry Wilson scored 2 late goals in the 95th and 96th minute, and it was probably as buzzing as I've ever seen Craven Cottage, because notoriously it's a very quiet stadium. But the place was absolutely bouncing. So I'm sure they'll be hoping for a similar kind of game, with it being a Saturday night game under the lights. But I think it'll be quite low scoring, Chris. I don't see it being a goal fest.
I completely agree. I've written down 0-0. Cyril thinks 2-1 to Fulham, and Ray has gone 3-1 to Brentford. What are you going for?
I'm going to go for 1-0 to Brentford.
1-0 Brentford. Okay. Right, so let's move on to the Sunday games, Gareth. Of course, 3 games take place on Sunday in the Premier League. We start off with Bournemouth against Newcastle. Of course, Newcastle are in Champions League action, so you would expect 1 or 2 changes in this game. Bournemouth have had a good start to the Premier League season as well, as I mentioned earlier. Now, at the moment, Bournemouth are 4th, Newcastle are in 10th. Bournemouth have scored 6 goals in the Premier League this season, Newcastle 3. And Bournemouth, as I mentioned, they've won 3 out of 4, beating Wolves, beating Tottenham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and most recently beating Brighton 2-1. Newcastle won their last game 1-0 at home at St James's Park against Wolves. How do you see this one going?
I mean, literally have the TV on in the background here, Chris, and
we can hear it.
Yeah, well, I actually have the volume turned down, but the place looks absolutely buzzing there. Of course, welcoming Barcelona tonight, and I think regardless of what happens in that game tonight, Chris, that's going to be the big game for Newcastle at home, returning to the Champions League, playing Barcelona here, one of the favourites, and of course, there's an affiliation between the 2 clubs with Sir Bobby Robson. And of course, they played each other a number of years ago, as people have pointed out this week, and Newcastle won the game 3-2. So I think that's been a major focus. You know, you hear about there's over 11,000 people waiting on a ticket for this game. They couldn't think the site kept crashing. So this is as big as a game as Newcastle will have all season at home. So, well, they won, lose or draw tonight. I do think there will be a hangover on Sunday. You say they probably make some changes. I think they've been slightly unfortunate that Vassa's got injured. I think he's missing until the next international break. So he's signed a player for 55 million. You kind of want him to hit the ground running. He's got injured. So it's put a lot of pressure onto the striker that's come in, Wout Mara. He scored, of course, against Wolves last week. I know I went for a big Newcastle one. They ended up having to grind it out 1-0. But I think it was a relief for Newcastle to get 3 points on the board, because some of the games they had played on, they were unfortunate not to pick up points. The Villa game, they drew, they should have won. The Liverpool game, they lost in the last minute. Even with 10 men, they probably should have won the game. So I think just sheer delirium to get up to 3 points. And I think Newcastle will still be a very competitive team this year, despite losing Isak. And of course, Anthony Gordon will be coming back from his suspension soon as well, and he'll get a different layer. So I think the best is yet to come for Newcastle. They're one of those special clubs, Chris, that regardless of injuries, regardless of who's missing tonight, they will give Barcelona everything at home. That'll be a very difficult game for Barcelona tonight. They'll have to work really hard to win that game. I think away from home against Bournemouth, it'll be a different kind of Newcastle team. I think Bournemouth are cutting Newcastle right now directly after this game. Thursday to Sunday's a quick turnaround. And emotions will run high tonight. So, look, Areola is a brilliant coach, but he will have a plan in place for Newcastle. And I think Newcastle will have invested so much into this Barcelona game that Bournemouth will catch them off guard. So I fancy Bournemouth. They won at home on Sunday now.
Before I get your score prediction, so after a 4-2 opening weekend defeat to Liverpool, Bournemouth have won each of their last 3 games in the Premier League. The Cherries have won 4 successive games in the competition twice before, and that was December 2023 and August 2018 under current Newcastle boss Eddie Howe. And Newcastle United have gone 3 away Premier League games without scoring, drawing 2 and losing 1, with the last 2 ending goalless. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Bournemouth win. They have had a fantastic start, and I know we mentioned this before, Gareth, that 4 of their back 5 left the football club in the summer. Areola has done a fantastic job.
Incredible. And I don't see him being the Bournemouth manager next season unless they do something really special this season and get into Europe. I think he will definitely be courted by another club. When you think about Ruben Amorim's job, if it becomes available, Chris, if you're looking inside the Premier League, Areola and Glasner have got to be the top 2. It's got to be one of them 2 feet, and they probably interview both. And then, whatever feeling they get from either or, they'll go for one of them. But regardless, I don't see these 2 managers, Glasner and Areola, being at their clubs next season. So there's going to be plenty of movement, whether that's mid-season, the summer next year. But look, Bournemouth just got to enjoy the ride. It's been brilliant under Areola, and they think they had that really difficult start under Areola. And there's a lot of question marks about should they have stuck with Gary O'Neill, but they've just went on to another level. And again, Chris, you've mentioned lost players, and they just look as strong. And I think that's down to the manager and the recruitment team that got in place and the structure of the club. A bit like Brighton and a bit like Brentford, there doesn't seem to be any drop off despite these big names leaving the club, whether that's on the pitch or off the pitch. So it's an absolute lesson how do you run a football club or how do you run any business. That not one person's bigger than the actual business itself. So I don't see anything other than a Bournemouth one. I just think they're playing with so much confidence, and as I rightly pointed out about Newcastle there tonight, it's such a big game. So I'm going to go for 3-1 Bournemouth.
3-1?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, next up, Sunderland take on Aston Villa. Now, Aston Villa are winless at the moment in the Premier League, which is very unusual under Emery because he's done a great job there. They've only got 2 points so far this season. Does it surprise you, Aston Villa, so far this season, Gareth? And what have you made of Sunderland? Because Sunderland at the moment are currently 7th in the Premier League table.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about Villa a few times, Chris, haven't we? And I don't want to be celebrating here, but I did say at the start of the season, I thought that Villa would have a tricky season. Now, I didn't expect it to be as grim as this early on. I just thought the lack of transfer, I thought that would hold them back. And we've seen this before, Chris. Sometimes you don't get new players, things can go very stale very quickly. And look, at 3 o'clock games last week, I watched the Everton and Aston Villa game. So I really wanted to look at Aston Villa and see, where they were going wrong or what the main issues are. But I mean, I couldn't believe how toothless they looked. I mean, they haven't scored a goal in their 4 games, and well beaten by Crystal Palace. Against Newcastle on the opening day, they were tragic. They were very fortunate to get a point. Crystal Palace absolutely battered them, and they were tough. I watched them against Brentford as well on the second game of the season. They were very, very poor at Brentford. I know they scored in the League Cup the other night at Brentford, but lost on penalties, and it's just another loss and more pressure on the manager. And look, of course, the Europa League's a big opportunity for teams like Aston Villa, but they go to the League Cup so early. And Villa would have looked at Spurs and Crystal Palace and Newcastle ending their trophy droughts and looked at the League Cup as a possibility. But of course, that's gone now. I think there's a big pressure on this game, Chris. I think Emery does have credit in the bank because of how well he's done there, but football can change very quickly. And Villa are too talented of a team, despite not enough fresh faces coming in. There's too much talent in that Villa team to be where they are in the league. And if they were to be there the next international break, there would be a real concern. And I don't know, maybe they would give him a bit more time to the next international break, but I think between now and the international break, and he's always start scoring goals again and picking up points. And if they can even buy 1-1 in the next 2 or 3 games, just to get them by, and then maybe kick on after the last international break. But I think there's so many managers, Chris, already under real pressure because of the luxurious funds of the Champions League. And not saying Villa will feel they should be there, but they should be one of the teams competing, Chris. Villa shouldn't be caught adrift after 7 or 8 games. They've got too many good
Absolutely.
players. We've pointed this out, Chris, before, that when Unai Emery teams get in a bad rut, it usually ends with Unai Emery leaving the club. Whether that means he resigns or he's sacked, he doesn't seem to be able to turn around these bad runs of form. And it's a bit like we says with Ange, Chris, the season before last year. This has continued from the back end of last season, where Palace have lost the FA Cup semi-final to Villa, losing to United in the last game of the season when the Champions League was in their own hands. They go to United team who just lost the Europa League final, had nothing to play for, and they lost the game 2-0. So it's a huge game at Sunderland. They are a promoted team, and Villa will be expected to win the game on paper. But we've already seen with Sunderland, Chris, it's not going to be easy. And they've won their 2 games at home against West Ham and Brentford, so they'll be feeling confident against a team that hasn't scored a goal all season.
Yeah, I feel that Emery and Aston Villa will get their first win of the Premier League campaign. at the Stadium of Light on Sunday. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Villa win. And this stat kind of backs up my thinking as well, because Sunderland have won just one of their last 12 league meetings with Aston Villa, drawing 5 and losing 6. Although that most recent Premier League meeting was in January 2016, which ended 3-1. What's your score prediction for this one?
I'm going for a 1-1 draw, Chris.
1-1. Okay, right. So the last game of match week 5 is Arteta against Pep. It is Arsenal v Manchester City at the Emirates Stadium, 4:30 p.m. kickoff. Now, Arsenal are currently second. Manchester City are sitting in 8th. Arsenal have scored 9 Premier League goals this season to City's 8. Of course, Arsenal have just won in the Champions League 2-0. Last weekend, they beat Nottingham Forest 3-0 at the Emirates, a very comfortable win for them. Pep Guardiola's City had a very comfortable win as well last weekend, beating rivals Manchester United 3-0 at the Etihad. Now, previous meetings in all competitions, Arsenal have won 92, City have won 57, and 45 games finishing as a draw. Arsenal have won 2 of their last 4 league meetings with City, drawing 2, as many as their previous 22 beforehand, drawing 5 and losing 15. The Gunners could win back-to-back league games against City for the first time since December 2015. This is a huge game for both clubs, Gareth. How do you see this one going?
Well, Chris, I think it's really important last week that Man City won the game, especially after Liverpool getting that late goal. City kicked off 9 points behind Liverpool. If they had lost that game, already 9 points behind the league leaders and champions from last year, would have felt like a massive gap already, and difficult to see how they could have come back from that. I know it's very late in the season, but that would involve Liverpool losing 3 games for City to cut that gap, or a load of draws. So I think it was really important. They won. They stay within touching distance, 6 points. But another tough game for Man City away to Arsenal, who, pains me to say it, have impressed. I thought that was a really impressive one in the Champions League against Bilbao. You've seen the atmosphere, Chris. We were there in Bilbao in May when Spurs won the Europa League. The fans are really passionate out there. Really nice people, but they're very, very passionate people. And I think Arteta knew that because, of course, he's from the other side of the San Sebastian, Real Sociedad, so very similar as well. And I think it really helped Arsenal that the likes of Mourinho and Zubamendi knew what they expect from Bilbao. I think the new signing, Mosquera, has been a really, really top signing for. I think they paid about 15 million euros for him, which looks a real bargain because Saliba's been injured, and it doesn't look like they're missing Saliba at the moment, and that's the biggest compliment you could give Mosquera. Arsenal look, they have really good depth, especially in that defensive area. They've got 2 players that can play in positions. Hincapi, who we looked at, is there, and he hasn't even kicked the ball yet, really. So I think they're well stacked at the back. They've got options in midfield, and I think Enquiries is the best. It's still they come from him, but they've got options up front, and of course Matchweek, who I wasn't convinced by at Chelsea, looks a totally different player at Arsenal. So this is a very difficult game for Man City. I think Pep had so much joy against Arsenal up until a couple of years ago, where Arsenal now seem to be getting the upper hand, or there's a lot of draws in the game. So I think Arsenal are unbeaten against Man City in 4 or 5 games. So that would suggest that Arsenal are a team in the second, and City have it all to prove. But you'd be a fool to write Man City off. We know on the day they can beat anyone. I can see this being a really tactical, tight affair. But I think City will know the dangers that Arsenal have. I don't see City being as expensive as they were against Man United. They may be a lot more pragmatic. We know Arsenal in the big games as well won't overcome it. So I can see it being a really cagey affair where it may come down to a penalty or a moment of quality.
Gareth, what are you going for?
People are going to like this. I'm going for a 0-0 draw. Bad way at the end of the weekend. A very dull affair.
I'm going for 1-1. I think that Arsenal will probably score from a set piece, and I think that Haaland will score from open play because he's on fire right now, both for club and country. What a striker he is. So we're both going for a draw for the last game of match week 5. Gareth, enjoy the weekend. Let's hope that it is a real entertaining weekend of Premier League football. Let's hope that Spurs continue this winning run in the Premier League and keep climbing up that Premier League table, because I love this winning feeling following Tottenham Hotspur home and away. But enjoy the weekend. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, it's great, Chris. I mean, it would be much harder to do these prediction shows if Spurs were getting beat every week. So, I mean, it's if you're a Wolves fan or a Leeds fan, it must be difficult when you're doing these videos at the moment. You're just kind of going on hope rather than expectation. But at the moment, yeah, really good for us. Let's hope we can get a result away at Brighton, because that would be I would round off a great week. 3-1s in the space of 7 days. I mean, you couldn't complain. But you can find me on that handle there at the bottom at Gareth Spurs on Twitter. You obviously find me a lot on your podcast as well, Chris. We do this prediction show every week. I do be on some of the podcast directly after the game as well. So, great that people are enjoying the show, and it definitely looks like from my side of the camera here this week, there seems to be a lot more people putting on predictions. So it looks like there's more and more people watching and getting involved, and it is a great way to start the weekend. Looking at the games and trying to predict the scores, because it gets you excited for what's to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. A big thank you to Ray, actually, watching on Facebook. Ray has given us predictions for every single game. So, Ray, thank you so much for watching and all of your input. Simon has been putting regular comments in, and not only on this show, he does it, throughout all of the shows that we record. So, Simon, thank you so much for all of your incredible support on the channel. Have a great weekend, everyone. As I said, let's hope that Spurs continue this winning run, but whatever team you support, and we do welcome, supporters of other clubs on this channel, although it is mainly Tottenham Hotspur related. We do cover the Premier League as well, which we really enjoy, and I always enjoy these shows with Gareth. So, Gareth, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the weekend. Stay safe and well. We'll see you on the next one. Come on, you Spurs.